In the time that we have left, Mr. Browder, I want to return to the war in Ukraine, which is the really the showdown for Putin and Putin's Russia, and the outcome will obviously have lasting uh, impact on the world. And I want to ask you what I think of as the Dave Petraeus question. Famously, on his way into Iraq, General Petraeus turned to a journalist from the Washington Post, Rick Atkinson, who's traveling with him, and said, "Tell me how this ends." And I'm curious, not simply the war in Ukraine, but the larger story of Putin's Russia, this corrupt system, ridden with inefficiency and criminal activity. Tell me how this ends. Where does it go? Do you see Putin's falling from power? Do you see Russia stabilizing after that? Some people think it'll be even more unstable and dangerous after Putin. What do you think? How does this story end?
Well, so I'm a sort of scenario analyzer. I don't have a one ending scenario. There's three scenarios that I see in how this could end. There's the good scenario, which is I would put as a low probability scenario, probably 15%. And that is that Ukraine defeats Russia militarily, that we supply enough equipment, military equipment, that they're fighting for their homeland. They're fighting better than the Russians. The Russians are inefficient, corrupt, and demoralized, and that they win, and they decisively win, and they drive Russia out of Ukraine. As I said, it's a low probability scenario. But if that were to happen, it's my opinion that the Russian people would no longer allow Vladimir Putin to be in charge. How he gets changed from that is anyone's guess. It could either be a palace coup, in which case you end up with some other KGB general doing the same thing, or it can be a massive uprising, a violent uprising, and in which case I can imagine a scenario where someone like Alexei Navalny would become the next president of Russia, and then we probably have a very good scenario. But as I say, that is low probability, 15%. The more likely scenario, and I put this at 70%, is that this thing carries on and carries on and carries on. That Putin can't decisively beat Ukraine, and Ukraine can't decisively beat Putin, and neither side has any interest in giving up. The Ukrainians are not going to give up their territory, and Putin can't back down and look weak from a conflict that he started. In that case, this just goes on and on and on. And I should point out that, we say that this war started on February 24th, but in reality, this war started in 2014. That's when Russia took Crimea illegally, and that's when Russia sent in various people. They called them Russian-backed separatists, but I think that term has really been very unhelpful in defining how this whole thing has been playing out, because they're effectively Russians or Russian proxies for all intents and purposes, and have been fighting a Russian war for the last 8 years. So this thing, in my opinion, has been going on for 8 years. And there's no reason why it wouldn't go on for another 8 years, and with all sorts of unbelievable, heartbreaking tragedies along the way. And I dread to say this, but I think that that's a more likely scenario with a 70% probability. And then there's the really terrible bad case scenario, which is one I alluded to before when we were talking about the no-fly zone, which is and this is another, I put 15% on this. This is the rolling up tanks on the Estonian or Lithuanian border, and then having this big showdown with us and saying, are you ready to go to war with us over this country that most Americans couldn't locate on a map? And he's hoping that we will fold, that we'll say, actually, we don't want to go to war with you. That's what he's hoping. And everybody, it's interesting. When I talk to people, everyone says, well, that's impossible because Article 5 of NATO. But what does that mean? Article 5 of NATO is just a sort of concept. It's not, no one's legally required to do anything. We break treaties all the time if it's in our national interest to do so. And Putin's hope is that we'll all reflect on that and say, you know what, you can just go, you can have everything past 1945, all those things Poland, Czech Republic, et cetera, they can all be yours. That's the nightmare scenario.